The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 246.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 11th Doctor Christmas special, The Snowmen. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
I dreamed I was married to River Song.
We can talk about that in a second.
Okay.
And Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
I didn't have quite that great a dream, but how's it going?
Very well. Well, that might not be a great dream, depending on how you feel about River. So, folks, before we get into that, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. We're also on Instagram, where we're StarQuest Network. And leave us comments wherever you find us on social media. We love to hear from you. Also, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network called Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, where we kind of discuss whatever movies and TV shows don't fall into our other categories, our show-specific shows. And so there's some great stuff there. New movies, new TV shows, old TV shows. Just check it out. You can find it at sqpn.com/secrets or wherever you find fine podcasts. All right, Jimmy, let's talk about this. Let's do some dream analysis. What was this dream about River Song?
I don't remember very much about it. In fact, I didn't remember it at all until I was writing the first line of the recap for this episode, The Snowmen, in which I mention Amy and Rory, and I mentioned the Doctor, Amy, and Rory, and then I thought, oh, River. Wait, last night I dreamed I was married to River, and I don't remember much about it. I remember there was a staircase, like a big cinematic staircase, you know, like you see in the movies in some old-fashioned house or hotel or something. And I remember being at the top of the staircase with River and going up and down it with River, but that. Other than that, I don't particularly remember. But it was it was very elegant as a staircase.
I think this
no blue box, so maybe the chameleon circuit was fixed.
I think this is further evidence that Jimmy is actually a Time Lord who has had his memory erased, just like you know Dr. Ruth in the last season of the Doctor.
We just need to find his chameleon arch.
Yes.
Yeah, well, either that or I'm just one of the husbands of River Song.
That's right, one of the many. All right. So, but our main topic after that, and folks, write in and if you have any questions for Jimmy on his dream about River Song. But our main topic is discussing this 2012 Christmas special called The Snowmen. And Jimmy, could you give us that recap that you were writing?
It's Victorian England. And the Doctor has come here to mope after losing Amy and Rory. That's where I thought of River. The Paternoster Gang is trying to get him re-engaged with saving people, but without much luck. Then he meets new companion Clara, but doesn't recognize her as Soufflé Girl from Asylum of the Daleks. She's a governess for a family and gradually draws him into a mystery involving telepathic carnivorous snow that is threatening mankind. Since he was a boy, a man named Dr. Simeon has been telepathically linked with the snow, and it's absorbed his darkest dreams. Now the snow is preparing to take human form and conquer the world, but it needs a replica of human DNA in ice crystal form. This will be provided by an ice replica of a cruel children's governess. But the ice governess fatally wounds Clara, who ends up dying, just like in Asylum of the Daleks. The Doctor uses a memory worm to wipe Dr. Simeon's adult memories, but the snow he's linked to becomes the great intelligence and takes over his body. However, Clara's death causes the family to weep on Christmas Eve, which is so sad that it causes all the snow to melt, defeating the Great Intelligence, who the Doctor doesn't recognize even though he encountered the Great Intelligence twice as the second Doctor. Finally, the Doctor learns Clara's full name, Clara Oswald, and realizes that she is Souffle Girl from Asylum of the Daleks. This allows the episode to end on a happy note, as the Doctor is now fully engaged again for the moment with saving the world, and he goes off to search for Clara, realizing that if she died twice, she's likely still out there somewhere. And we cut to modern England, where we see a new version of Clara next to her own Victorian grave. The end.
The end.
For now. And this is another one of those Stephen Moffat fake outs, just like when they were prepping for Amy and Rory to leave, the Doctor kept getting in the same emotional state all over again, and then he'd seem to have progress. In the next episode, he'd be right back to where he was. Well, that's what's happened here. That's what happens here, because by the end of this episode, he seems re-engaged, but at the beginning of the Bells of St. John, he's totally disengaged again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, a few thoughts. One of the things is, I was thinking, like, why wouldn't he recognize Clara? And that's partly because he doesn't actually see her
Correct.
as Souffle Girl. There is a recording, but I think only Amy and Rory see the recording
And
of her.
at some point, he mentions in this episode that the voice sounded familiar.
Yes.
That he recognized the voice, but he obviously didn't see her.
Yeah.
At one point, Clara also irrelevantly asks in the TARDIS, "Where's the kitchen? I like to make souffles." And he perks up at the word souffles, but then they have to move on.
Right. Should point out that the voice of the Great Intelligence is provided by the great Sir Ian McKellen, also known as Gandalf.
Okay, yeah. Also, Dr. Simeon, who creates the Great Intelligence. So this is actually an origin story for the Great Intelligence. This is how the Great Intelligence came to be, is played by Richard Grant. And Richard Grant has also played the Doctor. Before the 2005 relaunch, there was an attempted relaunch in animated form with an adventure called Scream of the Shalka. And so Richard Grant played the Doctor in Scream of the Shalka and is known as the Shalka Doctor. He is an alternate ninth Doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which we are going to talk about sometime.
Yeah. You can get the video of it, but it was a really early flash animation, and it looks like it.
Yeah. It also has Derek Jacobi in it as the Master.
Yeah, Richard Grant is awesome. He's been in a lot of things. If you might have seen him recently in the Disney Plus series Loki, where he played an alternate version of Loki.
Yeah, I also recently saw him. I finally got around to watching the the Rise of Skywalker, the last of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
For now, and he played the bad admiral guy in it.
Yes, he did. He did. So,
by the way, there's also 4 prequels to the Snowmen. 3 of them are 3 of them are short video subjects, and that I know they have them on Amazon Prime. They're probably on YouTube. They're free. But then also there's a short story or a written book too that's a prequel tie-in.
Right. Yeah, they call them webisodes, but yeah, they were short promotional. They mostly concern the Paternoster Gang, or some of them concern the Paternoster Gang.
Well, they all do. One of them, which actually got misreleased as a prequel, not to this, but to the Bells of St. John, is called 2 Days After Demons Run. Yep. And it's about how Strax joins the Paternoster Gang. And then they have 2 others, the video ones, the webisodes. One is called The Great Detective, which is about Vastra. And then the other is called Vastra Investigates.
So Paternoster Gang, I've looked it up. They apparently get their name because they're based out of Paternoster Row, which is a real place in London. And Paternoster Row, Paternoster is Latin for Our Father. It's the street where rosaries were made in London. That's where all the rosary makers were.
Because originally it wasn't saying Hail Marys in the rosary, it was saying Paternosters.
Yes. I actually recently saw something.
I mean, it wasn't saying, it wasn't saying Hail Marys, it was saying Paternosters. I said that right.
Yeah. I saw something online where the archaeologists have been working there and have discovered some of the beads from those shops.
Oh, that'd be cool.
They're really intricately designed. So they said, "Oh, it was on Paternoster." I'm like, "Hey, I know that name, Paternoster." So that was really cool.
By the way, these what these webisodes
Mhm.
are, like 3 minutes long each, so they're pretty insubstantial,
Mhm.
most of them. And like one of them is just the doctor standing there being glum with the Paternoster Gang pitching possible adventure ideas to him.
Right.
However, I did like one line in Vastra Investigates where Ginny is talking about how mopey the doctor is, and Vastra says, "Heartbreak is a pain to all of us. Pity the man with two."
Very good line. That's good. The two
Yeah.
hearts. One of the things that's interesting, the opening sequence in this one has the Walter as a boy, the man who
Mhm.
starts the whole thing,
Dr. Simeon. Yeah.
Dr. Simeon, and in which it's said about him, I don't know if it's his parents or governors or somebody, that he doesn't play with others, that it's not healthy. And I was thinking, it's kind of also true of the doctor without companions. When the doctor's not, quote unquote, playing with others, it's not good for him. And they kind of keep playing out that theme throughout New Who. I don't know if that was, but if they did much with that in Old Who. But in New Who, it's always said, it's bad when the doctor is without companions, when the doctor's traveling by himself. We saw that with the 10th Doctor, with Time Lord Victorious, all that sort of stuff. And we kind of seeing it again here with lacking Amy and Rory. So I thought that was an interesting allusion to that.
Well, and talking with Old Who, it was very rare that the Doctor would even go more than like one episode without a companion, much less one serial. I mean, usually it would be a companion would leave, another would come in the next serial, or there would be overlap between them.
Yeah, in terms, I can only think of 3 instances in all the run of Classic Who where the Doctor didn't have a companion. There were 2 stories in the Tom Baker era, if I recall correctly, both of which, well, okay, the first one that I can think of is after Sarah Jane Smith leaves because the Doctor has been called to Gallifrey. And he has an adventure on Gallifrey by himself. And I think there's another one that's like that with the 4th Doctor, but I could be mistaken. And then at the very end of the 8th Doctor's TV movie, he runs off without Grace.
Yes.
And thus launches and he immediately gets into trouble because then we have the Time War.
Right. We just watched the 6th Doctor in the Trial of a Time Lord season where Perry departs. Does he pick up a companion in the very next serial?
Immediately, yes.
Okay, all right. I was just
In
kinda
fact,
curious about
we
that.
get our first River Song equivalent. He gets Mel, Melanie Bush, who is a companion from the future he hasn't met yet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things about this episode, the Snowmen, is like Christmas specials are usually one-offs. They're just kind of they're separated by usually months from the rest of the seasons, or it's the end of the season, the beginning of a season. This one was unusual in that it sits smack dab in the middle of season 7, and so it has to act as a bridge because not only is it in the middle of the season, it's also in the middle of the companion departure, companion arrival, and they did a lot of new things with it. There's a new opening sequence, there's a new console room, so it really feels like something brand new happening with this Christmas special. So it kind of had to serve this purpose.
And Christmas specials are just meant to be warm, feel-good Christmas TV viewing, and this is the most depressing Christmas special ever. I mean,
really
wow.
Well,
I have a note at the 15-minute mark. It is kind of a downer. And because the Doctor's just moping, he is unengaged with what's going on, and this goes on for. I mean, we're not even. He doesn't even become engaged until like the 35-minute mark.
Right. He's grumpy,
and
grumpy.
And then he's engaged for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then Clara dies 15 minutes before the end.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's fatally wounded 15 minutes before the end. So we now have all of her death to deal with, and we've got like 2 or 3 minutes of happy engagement at the end, and that's it. Wow, what a downer. It's not a terrible story. It's just unsuitable Christmas fare, as a BBC official might say.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually the second Christmas special in which a brand new to the Doctor companion dies. Remember the one with Kylie Minogue on the Space Titanic, where she dies at the end of it. And I'm like, what is with the dying of the companion? On a Christmas special.
She dies, but she also sort of like becomes a transcendent being that gets to travel the universe or something.
Yeah. still felt like I mean, and at the end of this one, we have a new Clara, a resurrected in some way Clara. So they both have sort of attempts to upending, but it's still a death. I mean, it's still it's kind of this weird, like, why are you doing this for a Christmas special?
Well, it works as a standalone special to have that bridge between, Souffle Girl and the Dalek and modern day Clara.
Yeah.
And that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be that connection, doctors saying, okay, there's something going on here. In Bells of St. John, I've met now 3 versions of this same person throughout time and space. What's going on here? Right. But yeah, as a Christmas special, though, it's like, well, why did you choose a Christmas special for that?
Well, because it was an open slot, and he'd already done the Doctor meeting Clara with Amy and Rory around, and so it would make sense as part of the transition companion arc to have him meet her without Amy and Rory around.
Right.
And so, for people who may not be aware of what we're talking about, Clara was introduced as a companion as the Impossible Girl. The Doctor kept meeting her at different points in time and space, and he would meet a new version of her each time, and then that version would help him, but die. And so, how can these all be the same person? What's going on here? Right. Is this a trick? Is she clones? Is she one of his enemies trying to get close to him? And he's going to explore all those options over the course of the next number of episodes after she's introduced in her final form, which is 21st century young woman from London, Clara, because they're all 21st century young women from London.
Yeah.
And except Amy, the one from Scotland.
Yes.
But he's going to conclude, no, it's something much weirder. She's not a clone. She's not a robot. She's not an enemy trying to get close to him. She really was born in the 20th century. And we're ultimately going to find out that the reason that there are copies of her scattered across space and time is because the great intelligence that we meet in this episode corrupts the Doctor's timeline all across it. And in order to repair it and save the Doctor and turn all of his defeats into victories again, Clara enters the Doctor's timeline and fragments so that she can help him at every moment in his adventures, whether he knows it or not.
Right. Yeah, including other incarnations of the Doctor, the first Doctor, and through the 11th anyway. We don't see her go to the later incarnations or the Timeless Children. Oh, let's not deal with that.
Yeah.
So, a couple of interesting aspects of this one, and thank you for explaining the whole great intelligence thing. I'd forgotten about how it plays out through this season. There's a...
Yeah, also it plays out backwards in time. We've got some retrocausality going on here because because the Doctor has the memory worm in a box, like it looks like a lunch box, but it's some kind of box. Yeah. With a map of the London Underground from 1967 on it.
Yeah.
And he refers to that as seems like a strategic weakness for London. Well, guess what? That's the second of the Great Intelligence adventures in the second Doctor time. The Great Intelligence shows up and has the Yetis infest the London Underground.
And that's where we meet Colonel Lethbridge Stewart.
Yes, before he's the Brigadier.
Oh, cool. We haven't talked about that one yet. We did talk about the first chronological Yeti story where we meet the Great Intelligence, and so we talked about that not too long ago. So I almost said Amy. Clara,
the great here, Dr. Simeon has those cards, business cards with GI on them for Great Intelligence, but Great Intelligence is not spelled out big, and it just looks like gastrointestinal.
Well, we're the GI Society. I'm sorry for you. So we meet Clara. She's working as a barmaid in a pub, but she's living a double life also as a governess. And I'm not sure why. Did we ever get an explanation for why she was working as a barmaid?
Well, diegetically, she says she was filling in for another barmaid, but it was just temporary. And now she has to go back to her other job, which she's been very secretive about to the bar people. And it turns out she's a governess, and she switches accents between Cockney and upper class. But yeah, I don't know. Was this because governesses don't bake souffles or something? Is that why this was here?
But yeah, and she's got the posh accent versus the lower class accent that she switches between.
The only thing I could figure out is, maybe she's lower class, but she somehow was able to trick her way into becoming upper class. But they really don't explain it. You know?
They do indicate that lower class is her native personality.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because when the ice governess shows up and is menacing her and the children, I mean, she demonstrates, it's like, show us your secret voice, and she does the Cockney voice for the children. And then when the evil ice governess shows up and is menacing them, she reverts to her Cockney accent. And one of the kids points it out. It's like, hey, you're using your secret voice. And it's like, oh, you noticed.
Yeah.
But that would suggest that her Cockney accent is her native one, and the posh accent is the put on.
So the pub she works at is called the Rose and Crown. Is that like as in Rose from the Ninth Doctor era?
Or Rosicrucians. It's a secret message. There's a conspiracy here.
Yeah, the only other Rose and Crown pub that I've ever seen is actually in Disney World in Epcot in the UK part of the world. What are they called? The World Showcase.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe maybe someone could let us know if Rose and Crown is a famous thing. I just noticed that. Dr. Simeon does get to say winter is coming, which was this is about the same time as Game of Thrones, and I was gonna look up, I forgot to look up whether Game of Thrones had already come out and we already had that line from Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones started, I think, in 2012. So I don't know if this was a pop culture reference or not, but maybe someone can look it up and find that out.
And we certainly have one other big metatextual thing happening in this episode because Stephen Moffat at the time this was on was not only producing Doctor Who, he was producing Sherlock.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the Doctor dressed up as Sherlock Holmes for a scene.
That's right.
And there is a bunch of there's some play on the dialogue level where Dr. Simeon, turns to the Doctor and says, "I know that Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character."
Yeah.
And then if you I forget if it's in this episode or if it's in one of the prequels, but I guess it must be in this episode.
Yeah.
Dr. Simeon also tells Madame Vastra that Conan Doyle is certainly basing his Sherlock Holmes stories on her. And so we've got a bunch of kind of playing with metafiction here.
That's
about in roping Sherlock in. And at the time there were actually people who were arguing for a Sherlock Doctor Who crossover.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen Moffat referred to himself as a courtesan and said he was willing to do it.
Well, here you go. You got it. No, I just looked up. Game of Thrones was actually finished with season 2 by the time this aired.
Okay, so Winter is Coming had already entered the popular culture, and so that must be the reference. Speaking of the mashup between the Doctor Who and Sherlock, I have a great T-shirt. The end of one of the seasons of Sherlock, he falls off a building. I forget which famous story they base it on.
That's based on the Reichenbach Falls.
Right.
I'm sorry, the story is called The Final Problem.
Right. And he falls off a building and apparently dies, but then we find out he didn't. And it was there was a fan speculation. How did he do it? And so I have a great T-shirt that shows him falling off the building, the TARDIS materializing to catch him with the 11th Doctor, and then dropping off at the bottom like a second later. So it's a great shirt, and I always hoped that we would have a Doctor Who Sherlock crossover, which would have been awesome. But
well, and Moffat was open to doing it with Benedict Cumberbatch, and everything. But since I don't have a Secrets of Sherlock Holmes podcast at this moment, allow me to talk about The Final Problem for just a minute, because this was meant to be the last Sherlock Holmes story. Conan Doyle had a lot of other interests besides Sherlock Holmes. He didn't want to do Sherlock Holmes at a certain point anymore, even though it was his most popular creation. So he decided to kill off the great detective. And he wrote this story called The Final Problem, in which he kills off Sherlock Holmes, except there's no body. So when pressure came to have more Sherlock Holmes stories, he first did a time slip, and he wrote the next Sherlock Holmes story after this was the novel, The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is set before Sherlock's death. So he found a time slip where I go back in time before The Final Problem would let me write more stories. And then he decided he didn't want to do that, so he just brought him back from the dead. And it turned out Sherlock survived that fall from the cliff with the waterfall at the Reichenbach Falls.
Okay.
But I don't like the final problem. It's a terrible story. It's terribly written. I mean, the individual sentences and paragraphs are all fine. It's not bad in that sense. It's not incompetently written. But on the structural level, it is terrible. Because what happens is this is the story that, I mean, in order to kill Sherlock Holmes, you need an opponent worthy of him. So we get Moriarty for the first time.
Oh.
Okay, this is the first appearance of Moriarty. And it turns out, because Conan Doyle wants to kill Sherlock in a short story, there is no time to build up Moriarty. So it turns out, unbeknownst to Sherlock's closest friend, Dr. Watson, Holmes has been secretly battling Moriarty for many, many years and not telling Watson about it. And Moriarty is like the greatest villain in London who's responsible for everything that's going on. He's the spider at the center of the web. And Holmes has never brought Watson in on any of this. But now Holmes has so arranged it that he's constructed a criminal case against Moriarty and his entire network that will bring the whole thing down in one stroke, provided that Moriarty doesn't catch him in the next few days. And he's got all these legal proceedings engaged to take down the lower members of the network, and Moriarty's going to be trapped himself. And we just have to go on the run to Europe for a few days to keep ourselves safe. And even if I die, it'll be okay because everybody will get taken down in my absence. And then Moriarty and Holmes kill each other at the Reichenbach Falls while Dr. Watson has been misled back to a hotel. And it's like, this is all tell and no show.
Right.
We're not given any, how do these cases work? Who is involved? How is all this put together? We're just told all this stuff that, there's this sudden, massively important guy we've never heard about before, and his whole network will come down in some mysterious way that is never revealed to us, as long as whether or not Holmes is alive. And it's like, guys, this is not how fiction needs to be done. You've got an awesome story here. Now tell it to me. Don't just summarize it.
Right.
I don't want the abstract of the story. I want to see it.
Well, thanks for joining us for Secrets of Sherlock Holmes. Next time
There we
we're
are.
talking about... I'm just kidding.
We'll cut that out and do that as a new podcast. No.
There you go. No, actually, it is interesting because they have... The Reichenbach Falls also is part of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock movies, where they put that in there as well, the death that isn't a death and that sort of thing. So it is fascinating. All right, so we were talking about the Doctor has become Scrooge-like. They decided to... It's interesting how with the last Christmas special, it was the 2 Christmas specials ago, it was A Christmas Carol, and he was trying
Which was awesome.
Which is the best one. And that had him helping a Scrooge-like person. Now he is Scrooge, at least in the beginning of this one. He doesn't even say it, but he practically says, bah humbug, at one point.
Yeah.
When Clara first runs into him. He's decided that the universe is ungrateful and wants to live like a curmudgeon in 1899. I mean, that's
living on a cloud. TARDIS parked up on top of a cloud that he's frozen solid.
Yes. That's actually one of my favorite scenes in this, of this thing, is Clara climbing into the invisible, into the cloud with the ladder up. And I mean, it's very fairy tale like. If it's gonna be a fairy tale, might as well embrace it. And
yeah, I was
like
going to
that.
say this is total fairy tale here, which is common for Moffat, where Clara first climbs up a ladder, which then leads her to a staircase, which leads her to a cloud, which leads her to the magic blue box with the grumpy man living alone on top of the cloud.
Right.
And it's all fairy tale. It's great. I like later how she at one point says, "How can we be getting this high up in the air so fast?" And the Doctor says the staircase is taller on the inside.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That was good. She also has the when she goes inside for the first time and says it's smaller on the outside, and he says that's a new one.
That is awesome how they set that up, because on her first visit to the cloud, she walks around the TARDIS but doesn't go inside. And when she knocks on the door, but when the Doctor answers, she hides and leaves the cloud. But then, when they're being chased by the ice governess, the Doctor has moved the cloud so that they can get up off the roof of the house they're in and get up to the TARDIS, theoretically, to safety. And so she's already walked around the TARDIS once, so she knows how big it is on the outside. When she goes in and sees it, she's marveling at the size, and the Doctor says, "Go on, say it, most people do." And instead, she backs out of the TARDIS, runs all the way around it to have another look at the outside, and comes back in and says, "It's smaller on the outside," which is great. I love that. For the first time in the history of Doctor Who, we have that, and it's one of only a few nice takes, nice variations on "it's bigger on the inside." Another is where, in the fourth Doctor's time, Benton gets to go into or maybe it's the third Doctor's time, Benton gets to go into the TARDIS, and it's like, "Well, aren't you going to say it? It's bigger on the inside." And Benton's like, "I thought that was obvious." And also, later on in the 12th Doctor's time, when Bill comes into the TARDIS, she thinks it's a lift.
Yes.
So it's bigger than it's not the same room at all. It's a lift, right?
and of course you have the first Doctor, 12th Doctor special where the 12th Doctor gets to play it up.
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, and also in the Husbands of River song, where the 12th Doctor comes in.
Yes.
And River doesn't know he's the Doctor, so he gets to be the one, "Oh, this is my time." And he starts totally babbling about how amazing it is that it's bigger on the inside.
That was actually one of my favorites because he just goes off, like he's like over dramatic and everything. It's really great. That's how it should be done.
Yeah.
So, one of the things so we're talking about when Clara falls off the cloud. That's the moment when the ice governess comes through and grabs her and they fall off the cloud. And in some ways it mirrors what happens with Amy. This grab from behind just as you think you're safe by this statue-like female enemy, I mean, because the ice governess looks a lot like a weeping angel, frankly. It's very, very visually similar.
Only no wings, but yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if it was an intentional callback to how he lost Amy to do it like this, or to kind of drive it home the Doctor's pain. I don't know. It kind of fascinating.
I don't know. I didn't get that, but I mean, I can't say that they didn't. But I mean, it's definitely. I think it has to be there in order to have the mystery of the dying and reappearing girl.
Right? Yes.
She has to die some way. And actually, I thought this was a fairly clumsy way of doing it. Because she's up there, she's rejoicing with the Doctor, and actually they subvert the companion joining moment, because the Doctor has just, urged her to become a companion. She's kind of agreed. He's given her a TARDIS key right out of the blue.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Remember this, because this is the moment it all begins." And no, immediately the governess grabs her and drags her off the cloud, and it's the moment it all ends.
Yeah. Right. And it's interesting because after she falls from the height of a cloud, it doesn't go splat and actually lives for a while, which is fascinating. Fairy tale. And he's convinced she will live despite her injuries, because he has his Time Lord sense of who his new companion will be, and it will be Clara, but not this Clara. He's confused. Like, she can't be dying because she's my new companion.
Now, did she survive the fall, or did she die, but then Strax was able to use some technology to revive her briefly?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Doctor was still convinced that she would live, although I didn't know it was a time. I didn't get that it was a Time Lord thing. I thought he was just like having faith against, or having hope against whatever, because Vastra calls him on it. It's like, "How do you know this?" And he's like, "Well, I think the universe owes me one."
Yeah, it's kind of a karma type thing of where everything the Doctor's done, he's owed one. Of course, the universe laughs.
Right. Yeah, that's possible too, I guess. Yeah, I guess I was picking up that he had some sixth sense, that the Doctor has this extra sense of who his new companion will be all the time, or something along those lines.
By the way, speaking of fairy tale, another real fairy tale. Well, there's several fairy tales elements here. Like when after the doctor uses the memory worm to wipe a bunch of. And by the way, the doctor is totally capable of wiping people's memories himself.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they're using a memory worm here. When he uses it to wipe Dr. Simeon's adult memories and the great intelligence takes him over, suddenly he has the ability to freeze things. It's like wait, I thought your memories just went into him to replace, because you said now that his adult memories are gone, there's space for your mind. So your mind goes in there, and suddenly he's like Iceman. He's got ice powers, which is kind of fairy tale. But then when Clara dies back at the ranch, the whole family is crying on Christmas Eve. It is so sad. Everything melts, and it's not just melted water. It's actually tears falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Yep.
The magic
for
of
fairy
Christmas.
tale reasons.
Yes. When the doctor goes in and confronts Simeon, by the way, the great intelligence rings a bell. So he does have
kind of remember.
Yeah. Although, and I thought that might be a little bit of a pun to the abominable snowmen, because they were in the
and he took the
monastery,
bell back to the monastery.
The bell at the monastery. That was, so I thought that might be a callback to that. I don't know. Deep cut. I was a little annoyed that Clara crying saves the day. It just seems a little too pat, a little too, I don't know, fairy tale.
Well, it is, and
there was no logic in it.
It's kind of okay. I mean, that's not what I meant to say. It's kind of, normally I can accept Christmas fairy tale stuff at Christmas, but this is depressing fairy tale stuff at Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw a reference, and this might be a cultural difference, that this story of the Snowmen is based on a children's book called The Snowman that is quite popular. So it's another literary basis for a Christmas special. That is about a sad snowman. So maybe that's what it's about. I was trying to find out more about that.
Maybe the doctor is the snowman.
Yeah,
he could be. Yeah, it's maybe.
I just figured this was Frosty the Snowman turned dark.
That would be carnivorous snowmen. I said I'd feed you.
The doctor
you what to what?
Doctor even had the hat to match. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I've heard of the snowman, but it wasn't part of my childhood.
Yeah, it was the same here. So maybe that has some explanation for why it's a sad. Maybe Britain has a tradition of sad Christmas stories.
Speaking of cultural differences, one thing that I didn't get is the Doctor. Doctor Who can get political, and it's not as it's fairly overt in this age of Doctor Who, not as bad as in the Chibnall era, but it's fairly overt here. And so the Doctor references early on Victorian values. And then later, when he's in the final confrontation with Dr. Simeon, he's like talking about how the telepathic carnivorous memory snow has met Victorian values, and that's produced all this horror that's going to destroy mankind. And Simeon roars, "What's wrong with Victorian values?" And I don't know what they're talking about. Right. I mean, I read lots of Victorian literature. I know there's a stereotype of Victorians as being very prudish. That's to most Americans. If you talk about something being Victorian or Victorian values, they're gonna think sexually repressed.
Right.
But beyond that, it's like, okay, what are we talking about here? I mean, we don't have any dark satanic mills in this story. There's nothing about the Industrial Revolution here. What Victorian values are in play that lead to the creation of the great intelligence?
Right.
Is it just that people are more formal with each other than in the 21st century? If so, then this would have happened in a lot of other cultures, because honor-based cultures tend to be extremely formal. It's how they avoid conflict. If you have people's honor at stake and they will fight over it, the way you avoid fighting over honor is not to damage anyone's honor, so you are extremely polite. That's why they say, that's why here in America it has been said, Southerners will be unfailingly polite with you until they're mad enough to kill you. And so sometimes outsiders don't read the little signs that tell you there's a problem here and we need to back off.
Right.
Well, guess what? Okay, Oriental societies frequently are very formal. Lots of societies are very formal. This is not unique to Victorian London, and so, or the Victorian era. So I don't know what values they're talking about that would lead to the creation of the great intelligence.
I do wonder if, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution. I do wonder if that does play a part in it, because of course there is, modern technology and electricity and things like that, that it was the technology of Earth had developed to the point where the great intelligence could finally develop. And of course that was one of considered the Victorian values of this development of the modern industrial system especially within London in particular, but within England as a whole, that it was becoming it had become an industrial powerhouse. And one of the reasons why it could be the great British Empire it was at that time.
Yeah. I was thinking that there was a swipe at repressed emotions and that sort of stuff too. That this was what Dr. Simeon was all about. Was as a child he had no friends and was emotionally stunted, and that's somehow Victorian value.
And notice how atypical he is of Victorian values. They hang a lantern on it. This kid's a weirdo.
Well, although the dad in the family, he is also somewhat emotionally distant and repressed distant from his children and that sort of thing.
So we should mention him. He's Captain Latimer, and he is, I guess, a military officer retired from somewhere maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got these two kids, Francesca and Digby, and he's apparently a widower. And he had this former governess who drowned they call it a pond, but it's like a big water basin in front of his house. And the last Christmas she drowned in it. It froze, and it stayed frozen for a month, so they didn't find her body for a long time, which is why the ice magically has a ice crystal copy of her DNA, because it's the magical memory water snow stuff. But Captain Latimer is like a lot of fathers in this period who have enough money to have a governess for their children. So he had this previous governess who is dead, and now he's hired Clara, who is pretending to be Miss Montague, and the kids love her. And actually, so does Captain Latimer. He is really sweet on her, and if she hadn't died, and if she hadn't become a companion to the Doctor, we would have had one of these governess becomes the new mistress of the household plots, because he's clearly Captain Latimer is clearly interested in Clara and wants to marry her.
There's a great line where he says, "You have, if I may say, a remarkable amount of wisdom in these matters for one so very pretty, Miss Montague. Young, I mean."
Yes. And when the Doctor and Clara and the kids are coming downstairs to flee from the ice governess, Captain Latimer is like, "Who the H are you?" And the Doctor says, "Oh, I am the gentleman friend of Clara here, and we have just been upstairs kissing." And then all this craziness happens about the ice governess, and Captain Latimer's response is, "You have a gentleman friend?"
his first concern. Not that there are carnivorous snowmen and an ice governors, but yes, that was very good. So, by the way, I quickly looked up the Snowman is a 1982 animated adaptation that was aired on British television, adaptation of a book in which a boy befriends a snowman who melts at the end, and the boy is very sad. So it is a sad Christmas story, and thus this is a sad Christmas story. So I guess there's some sense there. Yeah. The other thing I liked about this was another scene that was kind of interesting is typical Moffat clever dialogue was the Madame Vastra interrogating Clara in one words. It didn't make any logical sense, but it was
it was kind of annoying in that respect, although it was also interesting.
Yes, where Clara could only answer in one word because for truth, quote unquote, it's like a truth detector, and so the one word that she passed on to the doctor that would get him interested was pond. Now Clara means the frozen the pond that froze with the governess in it, but of course pond is Amy Pond to the doctor, and I thought that was a nice, clever connection there. I kind of like that scene.
It's interesting in that scene because Vastra asks Clara a series of questions and she must give one-word answers to them, and she manages to do that. And some of the questions, it's not obvious. I mean, they're not just yes or no, and it's not obvious what could Clara say that would make sense here. And there's a particularly nice moment in that where Vastra has been kind of backing Clara into a corner. Now, the reason she said that we're going to do this one-word response thing is because lies are made of multiple words. And if you boil it down to just one word, you're going to get the truth, which is false.
Yeah.
But it's the premise we're going with. So she's been backing Clara into a corner and then says, what do you make of that? And she's been challenging Clara's perspective. And Clara's one-word response is to what do you make of that is words. In other words, it's all a lie.
Right. Yeah.
and that was a clever moment. And then eventually we get pond, and they heighten it because Jenny, the maid or whatever, is like, what could you possibly say here? And then we cut to the doctor being phoned, and it's like she gave the word pond, and the doctor is instantly re-engaged.
Right.
As he's wearing her Amelia Pond's glasses, her reading glasses.
Oh, that's true. Right. That's from the last time. Yeah, he saw her. Yeah, there was one answer in there I didn't understand. Like, kindly choose a word to indicate your understanding of this. And Clara says man, and I'm not sure what that.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
so it was an interesting, clever bit of back and forth. Very, very Moffat-y in the way it was written. But like a lot of Moffat-y things, there's stuff that doesn't quite work. But he can't fault a guy for not like taking a risk.
He's trying. Yeah.
Then that is definitely there. Anything else to say about this episode? Any last notes, Father Cory?
One thing I will say, we mentioned briefly that, we see the new TARDIS interior. This is the revamped TARDIS interior we see throughout the rest of Matt Smith's era, and then through Peter Capaldi's, it gets a little bit more of a facelift. And, Jimmy and I both have kind of said we're not really the biggest fans of the new TARDIS interiors.
Add me to that. Yeah.
Yeah, But of course,
especially the 9th and the 13th, those organic-y coral and crystal things just don't work for me.
But I will say that this interior, especially the Peter Capaldi version of it, is probably my favorite of the new Who. I still prefer the classic Who interiors, but the of the new Who, this is probably my favorite. So I was glad to see it finally come back or come out.
And I agree. To my mind, Dr. Ruth has the best TARDIS interior.
Yes.
It's a modern version of the classic.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I would agree. I would love to see that come back in the future under some new showrunner. That would be an interesting addition.
Which fortunately we'll have before too long.
Yes. Soon.
So Jimmy, do you have any last notes?
Yeah, so I found it interesting. We have a good bit of role reversal with Clara and the doctor here, where she's clear, even though Captain Latimer is sweet on her, she is sweet on the doctor. And she flirts with him, and she takes the initiative and kisses him.
Yeah.
Which I think is the first time a companion has done that. I mean, not kiss the doctor, but take the initiative to be the one
seems right.
to do it.
Yeah.
And then, because like the 8th Doctor kissed Grace, but Grace didn't take the initiative there. But then we have other role reversal, which they even point out as they're fleeing the ice governess. Clara takes the Doctor's hand and is dragging him along to safety, and he's like, "Wait, I'm the one who does this."
Right.
And so we already have the intimations of what will be Clara's downfall, of her assuming the role of the Doctor.
Right.
Because it's the fact she tries to become the Doctor too much, to take on his role too much, that ends up leading to her downfall in the end. So I thought that was interesting. One of my favorite bits of comedy in this is early on, they establish when they introduce the memory worm, the doctor is going to use it to blank Clara's memory of the last hour. Turns out if you touch the memory worm, you lose an hour of memory. If it bites you, you can lose decades.
Yes.
So the doctor has Clara in a coach and tells Strax to go get the memory worm, and Strax comes right back and the doctor's like, "Okay, what is it?" And he's like, "What?" He's clearly just touched the memory worm and has lost an hour of his time, so he doesn't know why he left. And this happens. They riff on this like 3 different ways with Strax and the memory worm, and I just found it really funny.
The best part of that was when he's under the carriage trying to get the worm out from the undercarriage of the carriage.
And he's forgotten the gauntlet, so he touches it again. And it's sir, I think I've been run over by a cab.
Yeah.
that was laugh out loud funny. That was a good one. I really enjoy Strax.
The Doctor and Strax in this were fantastic. I mean, they just went they're against each other. And Vastra said, "I need to bring some grenades." I think she really meant help.
Yeah.
I would love to have a Big Finish adventure with Strax and the Doctor. That would be fun.
Well, there are Paternoster Row Big Finish adventures.
Yeah.
And they also tie in because in this same period, I don't think we've watched it as a group, Don, but there's a 4th Doctor adventure called The Talons of Wang Chiang.
Not yet.
And it introduces a couple of figures from this period, Jago and Lightfoot. One of them is a showman. He owns a theater. The other is a professor. And they have a series of Jago and Lightfoot adventures, too, with the original actors. And I know they have like a Jago, Lightfoot, Strax team up.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Strax is clearly the breakout character of the Paternoster Gang.
Yes,
I mean,
he is.
Taken individually, all 3 of them are okay. I don't like what they do with Vastra and Jenny a lot. I find it annoying.
Yeah.
Individually as characters, they're fine. If you took out that one element, team would work for me much better than it does. But Strax is clearly the breakout character. He's a lot of fun.
Yes, he is. All right. I think we should wrap things up there. And I want to take a moment to thank our patrons and make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who. And their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of this 11th Doctor Christmas special called The Snowmen? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 1st Doctor story, The Crusade. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, do not attempt to escape or you will be obliterated. May I take your coat?
Right. This is going to be fun.